August 6, 1945, a sunny California morning, the same day an atomic bomb falls on Hiroshima, changing the world forever. But 6,000 miles away from that mushroom cloud, another tragedy unfolds in the blue skies over Burbank. A P-80 shooting star screams through the air, then suddenly pitches nose down. The engine cuts. There's no explosion, no dramatic fireball. Just silence as America's greatest fighter race, a man who survived over 200 combat missions, who'd been shot at by hundreds of enemy fighters, who'd cheated death more times than anyone could count, plummets toward the earth. His name was Richard Bong, and this is the story of how the deadliest American pilot in history became a legend twice. Once for what he did in war, and once for how impossibly, tragically he died in peace. Richard Ira Bong wasn't supposed to be a fighter pilot. Hell, he wasn't supposed to be anything remarkable at all. Born in 1920. In Poplar, Wisconsin, and yes, it is exactly as small as it sounds, Dick Bong grew up in a place where ambition meant maybe taking over your father's farm. His parents were Swedish immigrants. His father, Carl, worked the land. His mother, Dora, raised 9 children in a house that barely had electricity. The Bongs didn't have money. They didn't have connections. What they had was snow. Lots of it. And a work ethic that could break your back. Young Dick was shy, painfully shy, the kind of kid who'd rather fix a tractor than talk to a girl. He was smart, though good with his hands, good with machines. When he wasn't helping his father, he was tinkering with engines, taking things apart just to see how they worked. His teachers said he had potential, but potential doesn't mean much in a town of 400 people during the Great Depression. Then, in 1938, something changed. Dick saw a plane. Not in a magazine, not in a movie, in real life. A barnstormer came through town, doing loops and rolls over the farmland, an 18-year-old. Dick Bong stood there in a field, dirt under his fingernails, watching that machine dance in the sky like it was mocking gravity itself. And something clicked. Later he'd tell people he just thought, I could do that, not with arrogance, with certainty. He enrolled at Superior State Teachers College. But Teachers College? That was just the cover story. What Dick really wanted was the civilian pilot training program. It was 1939. War was breaking out in Europe. America wasn't in it yet, but everyone knew it was coming. The government needed pilots. Lots of them, fast. Dick Bong learned to fly in a Piper Cub, a tiny, fragile thing that felt like it might fall apart if you sneezed. But the first time he took the controls, his instructor noticed something. The farm boy was natural, smooth, instinctive. Like he'd been born to do this. By 1941, Bong was in the Army Air Corps. Not because he wanted to fight, not because he hated anyone, but because flying was the only thing that made sense to him. The only thing that made him feel alive. Here's what they don't tell you about becoming a fighter pilot. Most guys wash out. The training is brutal. G-forces that make you black out, split-second decisions that mean life or death, and the planes. They're not like cars. They're temperamental, dangerous machines that will kill you if you make one mistake. But Bong? He thrived. They sent him to Luke Field in Arizona, then to Hamilton Field in California. He flew P-38 Lightnings, twin-engine beasts that looked like something from a science fiction novel. 2 fuselages, twin-tail booms, a cockpit in the center. It was fast, it was powerful, and it was complicated as hell. Most pilots spent months just learning how to handle the thing. Bong mastered it in weeks. But mastering the aircraft didn't mean mastering the rules. And young Dick Bong had a problem with rules when they got in the way of flying. The most famous story? August 1942. Bong was practicing low-altitude flying over San Francisco without permission and decided to buzz Market Street. Not just fly over it. Buzz it, as in flying between the buildings, so low that office workers could see his face. One witness said Bong flew under the Golden Gate Bridge. Another said he did a victory roll over a residential neighborhood and caused a woman to spill her coffee. His commanding officer was furious. But here's the thing, Bong was too good to ground permanently. So instead of a court-martial, he got a slap on the wrist and a one-way ticket to the Pacific Theater. They figured, might as well put that recklessness to use. December 1942, Bong arrives in New Guinea. The war in the Pacific isn't going well. Japan controls most of the region. American pilots are outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting in some of the worst conditions imaginable. Malaria, dysentery, Heat that makes you hallucinate, jungle airstrips that turn into mud pits when it rains, and the enemy? Japanese pilots weren't just good, they were elite. Men who'd been training since childhood, who saw dying in combat as an honor. They flew Zero's lightweight, agile fighters that could outturn almost anything America had. But Bong had two things they didn't, the P-38 and a brain that worked like a calculator in combat. His first kill came on December 27, 1942. A Zero came at him head-on. Most pilots would have panicked. Bong didn't. He waited until the last possible second, then fired a burst that ripped the Zero apart. The enemy plane tumbled into the jungle. Bong banked away, calm as Sunday morning. That was kill number 1. By March 1943, he had 10. By July, he had 16. The press started paying attention. Here was this quiet farm boy from Wisconsin, barely old enough to drink, racking up kills like he was playing a video game. They started calling him Ace of Aces. Reporters asked him how he did it. Bong just shrugged. I just shoot at them until they go down, he said. No bravado, no speeches, just the truth. But here's what made Bong different from other aces. He wasn't a hotshot. He didn't take unnecessary risks. He didn't showboat. Every move was calculated. He studied enemy tactics. He knew when to engage and when to run. He protected his wingmen like they were his brothers. Other pilots loved flying with him because they knew Bong wouldn't get them killed trying to be a hero. By April 1944, Bong had 26 kills. He'd surpassed Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 25, making him the highest-scoring American ace in history. And he was only getting started, the thing about being a legend while you're still alive. It's exhausting. By mid-1944, Richard Bong wasn't just a pilot anymore. He was a symbol, a propaganda tool. The press followed him everywhere. Newsreels featured his face. Magazines wrote breathless profiles about the Minnesota farm boy who became America's deadliest ace even though he was from Wisconsin, but accuracy didn't matter. When you had a good headline, General Douglas MacArthur personally decorated Bong with the Medal of Honor in December 1944. The citation praised his extraordinary heroism and conspicuous gallantry and his role in shooting down 40 confirmed enemy aircraft. 40? Think about that number. 40 times, Bong had outthought, outmaneuvered, and outshot a trained enemy pilot who was trying to kill him. But Bong didn't celebrate. He didn't brag. In fact, the more famous he became, the quieter he got. His letters home were simple. He talked about the weather, about missing his mother's cooking. About a girl he'd met before the war, Marjorie Vatendal, a pretty brunette from Superior, Wisconsin. They'd been writing to each other since 1943. She worked as a secretary, nothing glamorous, nothing Hollywood. Just a regular girl who somehow saw past the legend to the shy farm boy underneath. By early 1945, Bong had 40 confirmed kills. He could have kept going. Some pilots became obsessed with the numbers, desperate to add one more kill, then one more, until the war either ended or they didn't come back. But Bong was done. Not because he was scared, not because he'd lost his nerve, but because, as he told a friend, I've used up my luck. He was 24 years old. He'd survived over 200 combat missions. He'd been shot at, chased, nearly crashed, had engines fail, fought through storms and enemy fire and mechanical failures that should have killed him a dozen times over. And unlike most aces, Bong was smart enough to know that luck doesn't last forever. In January 1945, the Army pulled him from combat. Officially, it was to send him on a war bond tour. Unofficially, they couldn't afford to lose America's greatest ace in some random dogfight after the war was basically won. So Bong came home. He married Marjorie on February 10, 1945, in Superior, Wisconsin. It was a small ceremony, family and close friends. No press, no fanfare. Just a guy marrying the girl he'd been writing to for 2 years. For a few months, life was normal. Bong did the war bond tour, smiled for cameras, shook hands, signed autographs, gave speeches he'd clearly memorized because public speaking still terrified him. But he did it because they asked him to. Then, in spring of 1945, Lockheed offered him a job. They were developing a new fighter, the P-80 Shooting Star, America's first operational jet fighter, faster than anything else in the sky, the future of aerial combat, and they wanted Richard Bong to test it. The P-80 Shooting Star was a beast. Unlike the P-38, which had piston engines, the P-80 was powered by a turbojet. That meant no propellers, No rattling cylinders, just pure thrust. It could hit 558 miles per hour. Nothing else came close. But jet technology in 1945 was experimental, dangerous. The engines were temperamental. The fuel systems were finicky. Pilots called it exciting and terrifying in the same breath. Bong started training on the P-80 in June 1945. At first, he loved it. The speed, the smooth, rocket-like acceleration. This was the future, and he got to fly it before anyone else. But the P-80 had problems. Fuel pumps failed. Engines flamed out. The ejection system, if you could even call it, that was barely functional. Several test pilots had already died. Lockheed engineers were working around the clock to fix the issues, but jet technology was so new that every flight was essentially an experiment. Bong knew the risks. He'd spent for years in combat. He'd survived the deadliest air war in history. But this was different. In combat, you were fighting an enemy. You could out-hink them, outmaneuver them. But you can't out-hink a mechanical failure at 500 miles per hour. Still, Bong kept flying. Maybe he missed it. Maybe he needed it. Or maybe, after years of being America's greatest ace, he didn't know how to be anything else. August 6, 1945. Burbank, California. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, light wind, a beautiful day for flying. That morning, the Enola Gay dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. 80,000 people vaporized in an instant. The world changed forever. But Richard Bong didn't know about that yet. He was at Lockheed's test facility, preparing for another P-80 flight. His wife, Marjorie, kissed him goodbye that morning. They'd been married less than 6 months. She told him to be careful. He smiled and said he always was. At 2:30 p.m., Bong climbed into the cockpit of P-80 in number 4485048. Pre-flight checks looked good. Engine start was smooth. He taxied to the runway, got clearance, and opened the throttle. The P-80 roared down the runway and lifted off. Witnesses said the takeoff looked normal, clean, smooth. Then, about a minute into the flight, something went wrong. The engine flamed out, just quit. 1 second full power. The next, silence. Bong was at about 300 feet. Low, too low to bail out safely. But he tried anyway. He jettisoned the canopy. He released his seatbelt. He started to climb out. But the P-80 was already pitching nose down. It was falling, fast. Bong ejected, but at that altitude, with that airspeed, the parachute didn't have time to deploy. He fell with the plane. The P-80 hit the ground in a nearby field and exploded. Fireball, black smoke, twisted metal. Richard Ira Bong, America's greatest fighter ace, the man who'd survived 200 combat missions, who'd outfought and outflown the best pilots Japan could send against him, died in a test flight, in peacetime, on American soil. He was 24 years old. The same day the atomic bomb ended the war he'd fought so hard in, Richard Bong vanished from the sky. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The newspapers that reported Hiroshima also reported Bong's death. America's greatest victory and greatest loss on the same front page. Some people said it was fate. Others said it was cruel coincidence. Marjorie Bong, 24 years old and suddenly a widow, said nothing. She just mourned. Richard Bong was buried in Poplar, Wisconsin, the same small town he'd grown up in, the same place where, as a kid, he'd watched a barnstormer and thought, I could do that. Thousands attended his funeral. Generals, politicians, fellow pilots, but also farmers, factory workers, regular people who saw in Bong something rare, a genuine hero who never tried to be one. Today, Richard Bong's name is on airports, highways, museums. His P-38 is in the Smithsonian. His story is in history books. But most people under 40 have never heard of him. That's the thing about heroes. We remember them intensely, then we forget them completely. But here's what shouldn't be forgotten. Richard Bong wasn't. A natural warrior. He didn't love violence. He didn't crave glory. He was just a shy farm kid who discovered he was extraordinary at one thing, flying. And when his country needed him, he flew better than anyone else in history. 40 confirmed kills, over 200 combat missions. Countless lives saved because enemy planes he shot down never made it to bomb-allied positions. But what makes his story truly remarkable isn't the kills. It's the character. Bong never boasted, never sought the spotlight, never let fame change who he was. He just did his job. Went home and tried to live a normal life. And then, in the cruelest twist imaginable, the sky that had protected him through hundreds of battles betrayed him in a single moment of mechanical failure. Some call it tragic. Some call it ironic. Some call it the universe's sick joke. I call it a reminder. Fate doesn't care how good you are. It doesn't care what you've survived. It doesn't care if you're a hero. Richard Bong proved you can be the best in the world at something and still run out of luck. His story matters because it's real, because it's unfair, because it reminds us that even legends are human, and because somewhere in Wisconsin there's a small town cemetery where America's deadliest ace rests under a simple headstone, Forever 24, forever the farm boy who learned to fly, the ace who vanished, not in combat, not in glory, but on a sunny California afternoon, doing what he loved one last time,